2, 1, you're live.
Hello and welcome to the Virtual House Church. How you guys doing? Hey, all right. This is Virtual House Church Live. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Virtual House Church was basically created as a result of my wife and I we still do, go to a normal house church. And we were talking a lot about what it meant to us and what we were learning and how incredible it was week after week on radio shows and conferences and stuff like that. And I kept running into people over and over and over again saying, man, I wish we had some place to go. We have no place to go like that. And I already had a radio show. I had an internet presence. So I figured, well, let's create a virtual house church so people can tune in every week. And this can be our house church. This evening is going to be a little bit different because we are live at a conference. And I'm joined with Steve Moutria here and Lex Meyer and Zach Bauer. So this week's Torah portion, what's the name of it, by the way? I didn't even look. Tribes and Journeys. This is a double portion, right? Starts with Numbers chapter 30, I think. And goes through the end of the book, as I understand it. So this year, I've done several years worth of virtual house church. And in the past, what I did was go through each chapter and give commentary on it and then have people call in and join the show and tell us what they thought or ask questions and whatnot. And that was great. We did 2 years worth of that. And I felt like on the third year, I wanted to change it up just a little bit and basically open it up to more of a Q&A type of thing, because Now You See TV approached me and said, hey, we'd like to host it for you. And I thought, great, because it's a lot of work to set things up and everything. And now all I have to do is show up and start talking. And so with our new partnership with Now You See TV, we changed the format just a little bit this year. And so far, it's been really exciting. We've had lots of people calling in with all kinds of questions. The difficult thing is, though, for me, is that I am known for a variety of different topics that I talk about. And a lot of people all of a sudden want to bombard me with questions about these other topics. I'm like, let's get back to the Torah portion. So I'm going to say that again for the sake of this evening, especially since I'm joined with these guys here. I've got some amazing Torah guys around me right here. So yes, the other fringe topics are cool and fun to talk about, but if we could, let's try to narrow it down to this week's Torah portions and or just questions about Torah in general. What does it mean to walk in Torah? And how do we walk this whole thing out? So we got a panel of great guys up here to answer questions for you. So we'll start with the audience here. Do you guys have any questions or comments about this week's Torah portion or about Torah in general that you've been just burning, like, I want to know? Now's your time to ask. Well, we could, but that could take up half of the, yeah, I mean, that's a lot. So I guess no. It's a huge section. It would take the better part of the show just to read it all. Yeah, do you have the Parsha in 60 seconds? Normally that's what we do. We play on the show. We actually there's a ministry out there called Parsha in 60 seconds, and they distill the whole study down into a 60-second soundbite. We don't have that right now. So 30 or 36. You have a question, sir? Okay. Balaam's donkey. Okay.
So my question is, in that story, the book of Jasher also talks about a magician. I have a question.
Borrow Zach's mic.
What's the guy's name that's riding the donkey?
Balaam.
Yeah, okay.
Ask again.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, so we need a Donahue guy out here with the microphone in the audience.
Yeah, the question about Balaam's donkey, and I just asked who was on the donkey. Yes, Balaam. But is that the same Balaam in Jasher? Because in Jasher, it talks about there was one of those words. I think it was Balaam, and he said he was a magician or a sorcerer in Egypt. And I wondered, is that the same guy? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head.
Yeah. I just read it.
My knee-jerk reaction would be yes, but I'd have to look at it. Anybody else have any insight on that? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Anybody else? Come on. You guys are here for a Torah conference. Or are you? First of all, how many of you are walking or trying to, or at least trying to walk your life out according to the Torah? How many of you are not? Well, by that I meant, let me rephrase that. Yeah, in this, like they're going to raise their hand here. How many of you would say it's new to you and you're just kind of trying to figure out what it's all about? That's a little bit. Yeah, I guess I would raise my hand on that one too, right? Yeah, new to. Hey, that's a good plug for Zach Bauer. Yeah. And we have a lot to unlearn. Now that everybody's got a plug. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah, and you could field them from the internet audience too over there if you have access to that.
Yeah, I can look at the chat here in a minute. My question to you guys, and this is the question I've been lately in my head thinking, the scripture talks about unity in the body. Is there anything that you guys can think of that would help bring more unity to the body according to Torah and trying to live that out? Because I always see people in Torah community just bashing each other like crazy. It's like a WWE match everywhere I go. And except for, in person, everybody loves each other. It's weird. But on the internet, it just makes you feel like you're under fire all the time. Is there anything in Torah and scriptures that would let us know that we need to be unified? And how do you guys propose that we should do that?
Yeah.
Go, Steve.
First, I would say humility. There's too much pride. I'm just going to call it like it is. When we come to the truth, we think we have the truth. No, you don't have the truth. Your eyes have just started to be open to it. And all four of us disagree on topics, harshly on topics. But we just came from having dinner together, and we had the best time in the world. Why can't everyone do this? You can. You don't have to be, okay. I'm hurrying.
That was the chat.
Okay. Yeah, to you too. No, but the thing is, I sense so much pride, and there's not enough humility. And none of us have, I've said this before, if you watch me any at all, none of us have all the answers. And we're all wrong on something, and we may be right on something, okay? And so when Yeshua returns, he'll situate us all out. And the thing is, a lot of us people, like me and Lex, you're hell, no hell, okay? But the thing of it is, do I think he's wrong? Yeah. But do I know he's wrong? No. Does he think I'm wrong? Yeah. Does he know I'm wrong? No. Actually, we could debate on that. But the point is, until you die, you're not going to know until Yeshua comes. And is the earth flat or is it round? Okay, we're not going to know until we die and you're taken up, or until Yeshua comes. The point being is this, guys. I sense there's so much pride. There's too much pride in the community. And this is what's bothering me the most, is because who in the world wants to join a community who is fighting already? They see it in the church they're at already right now over the color of carpeting. So why would they want to come here and fight with organizations that's going to be fighting over doctrine? We don't need it. We don't need it. We don't need it. It's pride. Allow me to say this. Pride is why Satan fell. Pride. And that's what we're dealing with, is pride. And I'll be mentioning in my message tomorrow just how small is the Church of Philadelphia. And we'll find out.
But you say that I see this happening. and you got to do that. But in the Bible, it says, whoever loves the world, the Father is not in him. So we can totally, if you want to go down that path, and we take the Bible literally, there are a lot of people that think that the world is round. And the Bible it clearly says, whoever loves the world, the Father is not in him. So how do we say, okay, the Father is not in you because you love this world?
The point being is, though, remember, we're all growing at different levels.
What did you call the world? We got the gender, they can do that, can't do the switches, can't have your hell no. Did you will the build? Did you don't will the build? What do you call loving the world? Boom, or is it that complicated? And what did the Father mean about loving the world? Because if we want to go to so far, we are flesh. We are flesh. And okay, I can talk, I can talk all night long. But I'm just getting started, so I will talk all day.
Yeah, I would say as far as the issue of loving the world, I don't think that has anything to do with the shape of it. I think it's talking about, following in the ways of the world versus the ways of God. That's the way I would address that. And to follow up on what Steve said a minute ago, look, there are just a few things that we have got to get right. Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. Right? Because that's a huge thing that you've got to get right. And that it is a free gift by grace through faith and not of works. In my mind, if you've gotten that far, that's the core essentials. Why can't we just talk about all the rest of this stuff without killing each other? Because it's not that important. That's the core essentials. So, for me, I'm like, yeah, I talk about the stuff that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Okay, but that's the path that I've been led to go down, And I'm just shocked at why we can't just do that. Why can't we just go out there and have these conversations? Why do we have to go psycho? Why do we have to call each other heretics? Why do we, And to Steve's point, I would say, yeah, it is an issue of pride and humility and things of that nature. But I want to try to foster an environment where it's open so that we can have, I love the fact that all four of us are up here and that we disagree on minor things. On the core essentials, we're completely unified, right? And I'm hoping that everybody could be that way, but unfortunately it's not. It's not like that.
I think everybody's doing this. Get a little too close. So as for the question that John asked earlier about how we can have more unity and not disagree and not divide over disagreements, I guess is the question. I disagree with Steve on a few things, but am I your enemy? No. Disagree with Rob on some things, but am I your enemy? I disagree with Zach on some things, but am I your enemy? Not very many things, but one or two. And I think that's the problem is so many times if we see somebody that, we disagree with them, it's so easy to look at them and say, he's an enemy of mine. He's attacking me because he's not in agreement with what I think. And it's so easy for us to do that. And we have to remember that we are not enemies. We are brothers and sisters. We are all trying to serve the same God. We are all trying to follow the same Messiah. We are all reading the same scriptures. We just have a little bit different perspective. We're all at a different place in our journey. We all have a little bit different revelation of things. We all have a little bit different understanding of things. And, it could be that maybe I'm wrong and there's going to come a day that I figure it out and I change my opinion on it. Or it could be that you're wrong and something's going to happen and you're going to realize, that you need to adjust your opinion on something. Just because you're in disagreement with somebody right now today doesn't mean you're always going to be in disagreement about something with that person. I mean, how many of you guys believe the same way today as you did 15 years ago? Right? I mean, how many of us used to go to church on Sunday? How many of you still go to church on Sunday? So, things have changed, right? How many of you used to love Christmas and, how many of you now don't? So, I mean, things change, right? And it's with the level of revelation that's been given to you, with the level of exposure to certain facts and truths, your opinion has adjusted and changed over time, right? So why are we attacking and judging somebody else who may not have had the same level of revelation as us yet, or have not had the same level of exposure to the same truths that we have yet? They're just on a different part of the path. They're still on the same path. They're still in the same family. They're still our brothers and sisters. We need to treat each other as brothers and sisters and stop attacking each other. And so if you see somebody who's in error, it's okay to say, hey, brother, let me help you with that. I think I can help explain that to you a little bit better. Don't say, you heretic. I think that's how we need to adjust.
I think something else to add to that is, the enemy knows if he gets us fighting each other, he doesn't have to worry about us fighting him.
I was just kind of flipping through this week's Torah portion. It is a double portion, tribes and journeys. And I'm going to ask a question for these gentlemen up here. Do you think, because Paul said, this week, the theme for this weekend is declaring the end from the beginning, right? Paul said that these things happened to them to serve as examples for us upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Looking at these two Torah portions in particular, do you think that this is part of a roadmap, maybe, for the end times? And if so, why?
Well, I always think, anything that was done in the past, Paul wrote in Romans, was served to our benefit for us to learn and grow in. And so as anything we see, it's there for a reason. Even Paul used the example of don't muzzle the ox, whenever he's working. He said, that was for us, because talking to the servants of the workers. And so the point being is there's always something in the Torah that is for today, and always something in the Torah and the prophets for tomorrow. It's up to us to seek it out. It's in the Proverbs, it even says, I can't even quote it. No, I'm sorry. But it basically says everything that Yahweh has is him, but it's the kings who search it out. We are to be seeking out those hidden things for us. But the problem is, I don't think we all seek enough. I'm just calling it like it is. I think we all are caught of being busy. We all, I'm talking us too. We're all busy and life happens. And I think the enemy is very good at getting us distracted on the little things in our life. And there's not fingers pointed at anyone because we're all a part of that. But the point is, I think the more we seek and the more we humble ourselves, the more he shows us those things that you're talking about, I think.
And so you mentioned Paul in Romans. He said that if you accept Yeshua, you are grafted into the cultivated olive tree that is Israel. Romans chapter 11. And so if we're part of the 12 tribes of Israel, either by blood or by grafting, then this week's Torah portion begins with tribes, talking about the tribes, and then it's journeys is the next Torah portion, and it talks about their journeys, and it just so happens to mention 42 cities, and we have this thing with 42 months in the last days. What are your thoughts on that, you guys? Don't preach. Okay, so Steve's going to talk about this tomorrow. Maybe we'll let him. What do you guys think? 42 cities, 42 months, last days, tribes, journeys. Do you think there's something in here for us to understand in terms of the last days?
I mean, it's a greater Exodus. It's a second Exodus. It's going to happen. All the prophets speak of it. Yeshua speaks of it. Moses speaks of it. So why wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are you going to talk this weekend, Zach, about the 144,000 issue at all?
I mean, unless it comes up, but I'm actually planning on apologetics.
Okay.
So
You are? Oh, I know. I don't know what your take is on it.
we disagree.
Well,
Yeah, I'm right.
well, I lean more. I haven't heard yours, but I lean more towards Zach's view of the 144,000. And I find it interesting. I just said I haven't heard his yet.
Well, yeah, I may change my mind too. What are you doing?
That's true. That's true. Well, but I don't know if it's in this portion or in one of the recent ones leading up to it, but it talks about them picking 1,000 from each of the 12 tribes to send them out basically as sentry guards. So you got 1,000 from the 12, and then in Revelation you have 12,000 from the 12.
Right.
Do you see a correlation there?
Absolutely. I think these 144,000 are going to have, I mean, this is just my opinion. I think they're going to have unmatched power that we have not seen since Moses. I mean, Moses did turn the sea red, or the river red, and commanded the locust and the flies and the frogs, and I mean that kind of power that overturns governments. Yeah, absolutely. They're going to have that kind of power, and I mean unseen in any of our lifetimes.
Yeah. Now Revelation describes them as virgin males.
I believe
each of the
that.
12 tribes, and I would speculate on this before I even heard any of your stuff, that it was probably young males, late teens maybe, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes to essentially serve the function of being sentry guards as a perimeter guard for the woman who goes off into the wilderness.
Well, let's just say, the way I envisioned it, and I don't know if any of this is true, but it's just my vision. And it's not like I got a vision, so don't go out there and tell people, he had a vision. It's just the way I'm thinking this in my brain. I'm working it out, is that maybe that you have, let's just say, in Beaumont, Texas, there all of a sudden is going to appear a pillar of light, and the Father's people who are in that area are going to head towards it, and they're going to go. And there's going to be a child, I believe a small child, because it says in their mouths will be no guilt, or I'm sorry, no deceit or guile, which means deceit. And you take that show, Art Linkletter, Kids Say the Darndest Things back in the 1950s. It was always small children because they won't lie to you. They tell you exactly what you answer your question, no matter how embarrassing the answer is. And that show was it went for 2 decades because it was so popular. So you got these little kids, and you have a small child who has that enormous power. And what it does, it strikes the pride down of every man who shows up and says, you know what, I've got a theology degree. Let me tell you what's going on here. Ha! Because they think they should be in charge. And what do you have? You have this small child. And I go back and I read the Proverbs and I read, the writings of the prophets, and it's all anti-pride, anti-pride, anti-pride. And the best way I think that the Father can slap down these guys, with these pointy-headed theologians, is put a kid above them. The first shall be last, the last shall be first.
Yeah.
That's what Yeshua said when he's describing they will come from the north, south, east, and west, and the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. I mean, he's talking about the greater Exodus there. And then what does he do? He picks up a small child and he puts it on his knee. He says, likened unto this is the kingdom. So I'm like, but that's just where I see it. But and you watch the video, you know.
Watch the video. Buy the DVD. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
All right. So, a lot of us came out of the church, and when we left, sometimes we burned the bridges, and the people there got ill will towards us. how do we react to people who are actively coming against us in our walk, who are defaming us, who are calling us, heretics, who are calling us blasphemers? How do we react in a world where we're leaving mainstream religion and following the Messiah? How do we react when they destroy our reputation and we don't have an opportunity to really address, what they're saying about us in those churches?
How did Yeshua react when they accused him and spat in his face and tore his clothes off of him and beat him and hung him on a cross? How did he respond? We're supposed to do likewise, right? We're supposed to lay down our life just like he did, right? Take up our cross daily and follow him. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. The testing of your faith develops perseverance, right? And so we need to, whenever an enemy attacks, whenever a friend attacks, whenever someone heaps burning coals on your head, what do? You love them. You return kindness, return love, right? And if you burn bridges, then go back and try to mend them. Be humble, suck it up, right? Because what is the ministry? It's the ministry of reconciliation. If you went through and you destroyed relationships, it's time to go back and mend those fences, rebuild, reconnect, show them the love of Messiah. That's what we're supposed to do.
And I can say from experience, having not done that, that's what we should do. That's what we're supposed to do. When we don't do that, when we react, as I am prone to doing, all it does is bring on more of it. In fact, this guy here has contacted me on more than a number of occasions to talk me down, and also say, dude, why are you giving your enemies so much ammunition? Here you go, fire away. Because that's what I'm prone to doing. That's my knee-jerk reaction to being hit is to hit you back as fast as I can. And unlearning that.
Turn the other cheek.
Well, you only have two.
Yeah.
And after you get both smacked, a right cross is on the way. Yeah, you got two more. True, you do have theoretically four. But when you have 100,000 quote unquote subscribers and 25,000 quote unquote friends and everybody with opinion, you run out of those four pretty quick. But Lex is right, Well, he's giving the correct answer, let's say, from Scripture. Have we all done that? I haven't. But there were times in the past where there were certain situations where individuals were coming against me, and in a way that in every legal sense was liable, was defamation of character, was slander, and every legal definition of those terms. And it was really hurting our ministry. It was not just hurting our feelings, it was hurting in about every way you can imagine. And I was well within my rights to go after this individual for legal reasons. And my dad said, you know what? Yes, you are. Yes, you could. Or you could pray for him and walk away. And I wanted to hit, I wanted to fight, I wanted to everything you can think of to get this person back. But I didn't do that. And I did pray for them, and I did not retaliate. One of them later ended up going to prison, and then eventually died. Is that because of this situation? I doubt it. But when it happened, I had this mixed feeling. On one hand, I was like, wow, one less person shooting at me, you know? And so I felt bad that I didn't feel bad, if that makes sense. But, you know, Scripture says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. God says that, right? And the advice is to just let God fight your battles for you. And there's wisdom in that. And taking the beatings that I've taken because I don't take that advice, I could say we need to listen to what Lex was saying a few minutes ago.
I think something to remember is that they're not our enemy. As much as they are your enemy, they're not your enemy. They're supposed to be the ones you're supposed to be saving from the enemy. And, you know, I have a teaching, it's titled, The Need for Forgiveness. Because, as you mentioned, you're quick to want to retaliate. Because why? You're not forgiving. And we all struggle with that at one point or another. You name it, and you can say, if I ask right now, think of someone who's done something wrong to you and you're holding a grudge to them. It wouldn't take 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds. All of us can think of somebody who's done us wrong. And then the question is, did you forgive them? Did you forgive them? Remember, Yeshua himself says, if you do not forgive, how can you expect the Father to forgive you? Just think for a second. If you are holding on to a grudge, you are holding on to something someone has done to you. If you're holding on to it, that means you haven't forgiven. I'm here to tell you right now, I will stand and tell you, you will not be forgiven. Not my words, Yeshua's words. I say because we as believers feel we have right to be angry or do whatever towards somebody. You don't have any right. You're a servant. You're a servant of the Most High who's telling you if you don't forgive. Yeshua gave the example. A servant didn't forgive his fellow servant. And this servant was just forgiven by the master of a great amount. The servant owed him just pennies compared to what he owed the master. And then when the master finds out, hey, you didn't forgive your brother over here. When I forgave you of this, go to jail. You're not getting out till you pay it. And Yeshua said, that's how my heavenly Father will treat you if you don't forgive others. This is a huge issue in the body of Messiah. And it goes right back to what I said earlier. I'm very concerned that a lot of people are thinking they're going to the Church of Philadelphia while they're holding on to forgiveness. And let's not forget, Church of Philadelphia means Church of Brotherly Love, meaning to forgive. And too many times, people are not doing it. And if we're all honest with ourselves, when I said it won't take 5 or 10, 15, 20 seconds to think of someone who's done you wrong, I know all of us quickly thought of somebody. We all have them. There's somebody in our past. It may be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it may have been yesterday. It could have been from 30 years ago. You're holding on to something. I'm telling you, you're not holding on to it, it's holding on to you. And it's starving you of growth in the Messiah. I'll stop preaching.
It is interesting that this is coming up, though, because in this Torah portion, there's a link to Paul. I wonder if you guys know it. Numbers 33. You know what it is? Ready, sword drill. Go. I'm not giving it a verse. I gave you the chapter. There's a link to Paul in here. Well, I'll just go ahead and give it to you. Because there's this passage where Paul prays 3 times for something to be removed. Thorn in the flesh, right? And I grew up in a fundamental, I would say parenthetically, legalistic, King James only, independent Baptist church that taught against the gifts of the Spirit. They taught the doctrine of cessation. They passed away with the apostles. And one of the things they would point to as justification for that was Paul. Paul had this thorn in the flesh, right? This thing he prayed for 3 times that it would be removed. And see, God doesn't always heal, because Paul had, eye trouble or some kind of, any number of ailments that they want to associate with that. And that never set well with me And I was praying, this is back in 2003. I'm like, Lord, what is this thorn in the flesh thing? And he had me go back, and he, first of all, he said to me, you know those big numbers? Pretend they're not there, because I didn't put them there. Those being the chapter numbers. Because we think new chapter, new thought. That's kind of the way we're programmed. So when you go back and read that chapter where Paul talks about the thorn in the flesh, we think new chapter, new thought. But the previous chapter, if you pretend those big numbers aren't there and go back to the previous chapter, he says, you want to know what I've been through? I've been shipwrecked, I've been beaten, I've been stoned, I've been left for dead, I've been, the whole chapter is all of the stuff that Paul's put up with. Pretend the big number's not there, keep reading. And I prayed 3 times that this thorn in this flesh, this messenger of Satan sent to buffet me. Well, a messenger is a person to deliver something. The word buffet is used only one other place in Scripture, and it's when Jesus is being punched in the face. Prophesy who hit you. The word, I think it's caliphizo, if I remember right, literally means to smack somebody in the face. Well, if you take it in context, he was asking for his persecution to stop. Think about Paul. Everywhere he went, somebody's whipping him, beating him, throwing him in jail, throwing stones at him. The whole previous chapter is all about that. And he says, this thorn in the flesh, this messenger of Satan sent to buffet me. Well, the idiom that he's referring to is actually right here in Numbers 33:33. Or excuse me, my eyes are 55. Sorry. 33:55. I'm doing this deal now. It says in Numbers 33:55, but if you will not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come to pass that those which ye let remain of them shall be pricks in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They shall vex you in the land wherein you dwell. It was an idiom for persecution. Yeah. And when you think about grace, I don't know about you guys, what's a definition for grace that you have typically heard? What does grace mean? Unmerited favor, getting something good you don't deserve, things of that nature. Well, that definition doesn't really fit. My grace is sufficient for you in that situation. I was a missionary for 6.5 years, and it was a ministry that their part of their mission statement was establishing grace-oriented churches. So in the various mission fields that I went to, I would ask the nationals, what does grace mean to you? What's your definition of grace? And most of them gave that typical definition. But I'll never forget this one guy in Kazakhstan, and it was under heavy persecution. He said, no, the definition of grace is the empowering presence of God that enables me to be who I'm called to be and to do what I'm called to do. And it includes unmerited favor, and it includes all those other things. But this is a power definition. Like when I thought of grace, I always thought of like a ballerina or something, graceful. I just, it's kind of this fluffy word. Well, yeah, forgiveness is a little harder, but like that was a power definition. I mean, even literally said the empowering presence of God that enables me to be who I'm called to be and to do what I'm called to do. Well, when you read with that definition, read the previous chapter that Paul talks about all the stuff that he goes through. I prayed 3 times for this persecution to end, and he says, look, Paul, my empowering presence that has enabled you to be who you're called to be and do what you're called to do is sufficient for you. And he carried on. I just noticed it from my notes from the previous years that was part of this week's Torah portion. So interesting that came up as a question.
We have a question on this side.
Yeah.
So earlier, a question was asked the general people, how many people still go to a Sunday church? And I raised my hand, not because I think it's the Sabbath, obviously, but because that was the place when I found Torah that I was at. So my question is, how do you gentlemen feel about ministering to the people who still believe that that's the day that the Lord, the Sabbath day, that are still stuck in that? Because I tend not to see it so much in the movement of people going back where they came from and going fishing.
Well, I'll just say that I think we should worship God every day of the week. So worshiping on Sunday is not a problem. I have no issue with that. My only issue is if you think Sunday replaced the Sabbath, then I think, okay.
And my question is really going to those people and being a light in that deception, because I've continued to go, and I've had the attacks come and all of that thing, and that's fine. I don't really care. I continue to go, and that's a whole nother story. But to me, it's more of a ministry of being there so that those people can see somebody doing something differently, so that it provokes questions, so that it causes the attacks, because in the attack lies the answer.
Absolutely. Where is the light most necessary? In the dark places, right? So if you have a light, let it shine and take it where it needs to be shown. Absolutely.
I agree, because we just recently moved to Northwest Arkansas, and the neighbor girl had invited Nadia to their youth group. And it's so funny because Nadia says, Dad, can I go? Should I go? What should we do? And then I go, well, I said, you can go. I said, you got your seats on? She goes, they're on. I go, then you know what they're for. She goes, right. And so it's like, I think there's opportunity for us to, do this. And now, like with these guys are saying too, I was like, my problem that I'm concerned with, because I met the youth pastor, and when I met him, I'm going, oh me, oh my, he's just like me, because his name was Steve also too. It's kind of funny. But when I was a youth pastor, it's like, he's doing everything I did. And so he's, in my opinion, he's doing everything right. And so, but the thing is, in that first night of talking to him, I felt the Father prick my heart. Are you just going to leave him alone? I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't just live Torah and just be in my own little house, us four no more, type thing. And so my concern with me is, I know the Father's telling me to outreach to them, to that youth pastor and the pastor. I met him as well. How it's going to work out to this day, I don't know yet. Because a reservation in me is I don't sing the same songs they do. Okay. And there's some songs that I will not sing, because it's just not right. Now, there's some songs I think are cool, awesome, and they don't even know the full meaning of it. You know what I'm saying? And so, but I'm praying right now for wisdom. Angie and I have talked about it, and I do know that here's one concern I have heard from, I had a friend talk to me. He says, Steve, we have no fellowship where we're at, and I'm looking to go to this church for fellowship. And I said, okay, all I can tell you is this. And we talked for a while. I said, are they in the light? Well, kinda. Okay, let's go kinda. Okay, and you're following the light. What fellowship does light have with darkness? I'm not going to be going for the fellowship. I'm going for the outreach, and if they end up kicking me out, then that means I did my job. Okay. Or if I convert people, however you want to call that, then I did my job. But I wanted to go back to the visit people where I did get kicked out of, basically, when we first came to Torah. But you hang with those people for 5 minutes, you have nothing to talk about, because it used to be all about the Bible. Well, suddenly now you have nothing to talk about, because they know you believe something differently. And so all I can say is, I believe if you feel the Father's called you to be there, then you need to do what the Father's called you to do. And that's why I'm working on myself. How am I going to be an outreach? I'm looking right now into getting into the local radio station and getting my daily devotions put on the local radio station as advertising. I'll have to pay for it. So it's going to be a while till I can pay for that. But I'm wanting to look out for outreach. I think it's time we, as Torah believers, become outreach minded. I think it's needed. I'm even working on T-shirt ministry. I'm getting a whole bunch of T-shirt ideas. I'm excited about wanting to get going, and just because T-shirts can get interest sparked. But all I'm saying is, if the Father's called you to be there, be there. And what they've just said too, it's not that's not the day. As long as we have that in mind and let those around you know, I think it's cool myself.
We have another question or statement back here. I'm in the back.
Steve, going back to your statement about the forgiveness by the king or the ruler, what did the servant owe?
Oh,
Yes. If it was forgiven, he owed nothing back to the ruler.
correct.
He owed forgiveness.
Okay, so your point.
That's it. He
Okay.
owed forgiveness.
Right.
That's the only thing that he owed.
Okay, right.
Because his debt was paid.
Correct.
He had to just realize
He-
that point.
And he had to walk in what was given to him.
Correct.
Correct.
Rob,
Forgiveness.
going back to the Parsha, you brought out the 1,000 from each tribe. Let's put some meat on that bone. 1,000 from each tribe to go do what? Address the Amorites.
Oh, yeah, right,
And remember what Amos 2:9 says.
right. Cedar
And
trees.
not one was lost.
Right. That's a good word. Yeah.
But I don't know if it was last week or the week before. You had a bad week, Bob, and a good week. And if you would only, there's not enough time to digest. What if you, like me, I'm sorry, you can find that the 2 hours on Friday nights for a whole week and all that. But anyway, you said something was crucial about Sunday, and they changed it from Sundays, and I got to go back and listen what you say, but you were having a week that week or something, but you say something about this is so funny. They still worship a son, they God on Sunday. Do you remember that conversation?
I think so. I think if
I mean,
remember
you
what-
talk
it was-
so fast.
Well, I think if I remember what you're referring to, I was driving
Sunday.
by a sign and it said Sunday worship. And it hit me. Sunday worship. Now, they wouldn't agree with what I was thinking. But at the same time, if that same church is doing the December 25th Xmas routine and the Ishtar Day and the Sabbath has been done away with and everything's been nailed to the cross, then it really is Baal Sunday worship, and that's, it's tough when you start to see some of the things not to become, I'm Phineas or Pinchas, right? I'm gonna stick the javelin out. I'm going to town here. Because they can't receive that. You're itching to say something. What? Go for it.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. No, what you said just reminded me of something, and so I just wanted to say while I was still thinking about it. You said you saw a church billboard and it said Sunday worship. That was actually one of the things that struck me early too. Like as I was starting to learn about the Sabbath and stuff, there's a little church close to my house, and they have one of those billboards where they're always putting different messages on it. And it's kind of fun to drive by and read the message because usually they're quirky and like awkward, and you're like, oh my. And so I always like to drive by and read the goofy messages they post on there. But I noticed one day that they abbreviate Sunday when it has the listing of times, and so it said Sun Worship, 10:30 a.m.
Yeah.
And as I was learning about the Constantine and Mithraism and all that kind of stuff, and I saw that and I was like, wow, it's right there,
right in your face.
They just say it, sun worship. And so,
Fight over this.
don't take my mic.
I know a lot of people who go back to church. They go back for a lot of reasons, and they think that there's going to be a ministry there, and maybe there is. I immediately think of that line in Fiddler on the Roof when the daughter comes and she's in love with the Christian, and he says, "If a bird loves a fish, where will they make a home together?" Because it's incompatible. Eventually, you're going to go to a fellowship at this church, and they're going to bring out pepperoni pizzas for some kind of fellowship thing, and you're not going to be able to eat and partake with them. Or they're going to do something else, or decorate, Easter eggs this week or something. Or so there's an incompatibility that's going to be realized at some point that you just have to, in my opinion, back away. When we first discovered Torah, Steve was such a part of that, being in St. Louis, and we heard all these horror stories of people figuring out the truth and going, I have to tell everyone, and going around to their pastors and their Sunday school teachers, and it was just this huge letdown, and it was just a gigantic, crash eventually that happened. And what do you do at that point? So when we first discovered Torah, me and my wife, after hearing all these stories, not just from the group we were with Steve, but other people too, we just said, you know what, we're just going to stop, we're going to back away, and we're going to leave. And like that, we were gone. But you know what? That caused so many people to come search us out and say, tell me what you figured. What is it you learned? And it didn't happen right away. It took years. But eventually, people were coming to us and saying, hey, what happened to you? I want to figure this out. And, let your life be a testimony. Let your life, because they think you've lost your mind at that point. Show them you haven't lost your mind. Because they'll recognize the fruits in your life, your kids growing up and being, all there, and you being successful because the Father's blessing you for keeping his Shabbat, and so he's blessing your business, and, so they're going to see the fruit in your life over time. Let your life be a testimony of time. So that's all I have to say for that.
And I'll also say, like I have dreaded going back with people that I know, my parents or whatever, to Sunday service. Whenever I see my family, of course, you going to church with us? Oh, yeah, okay. And in that situation, I'm primarily going just to meet up with friends I haven't seen in a long time, just to be honest with you. Because I know that the message is either going to be severely watered down to the point where I'm barely getting water out of it, or it's going to be completely contradictory to what I believe. And like has already been said, typically they're going to have a ham or a brisket of some sort, pork, a fellowship dinner afterwards, so that's going to be an issue. But what was interesting with my family, I love my parents dearly. We have a great relationship, but they're still very much of the kind of the old school Christian mentality. And, in our family, Christmas was always a big deal. And Easter, I was instrumental in starting the drama ministry in my church. And I used to write, direct, produce, and play Jesus and Passion plays. And my parents were always involved with that too. So, the Christian holidays were always a huge deal. As I started coming out of those things, and what really hit me the hardest was, yes, people did get saved at the various performances that we would do and everything. But when I read that the Pharisees came to Jesus and they said, hey, what's the sign? Would you show us a sign? He goes, I'm only going to give you the sign of Jonah. 3 days, 3 nights. And I'm like, how do you get 3 days, 3 nights from Friday to Sunday? And here I am thinking I'm really serving him with my gifts, talents, and abilities and my time and, everything. I'm putting everything I have into it and playing the part of Jesus on the cross and the whole deal. All of that time, I'm denying the only sign that was given. 3 days, 3 nights, while I'm doing Good Friday and Ishtar Sunday. And when I pulled out of all of that, a lot of people were kind of like, what? Here's the guy who used to do the Jesus Passion plays. And now I'm talking against it. And they were aware of that. My parents know it. They know where I'm coming from. They're, I think, starting to see more, but it's tough. Jesus wasn't even accepted in his own hometown, right? So they're going to have to come to it on their own. But we went to visit them. My parents live in Massachusetts, but they have a Florida home during the wintertime. And my wife and I went to go see them. And it was during the Easter week. And they said, will you come to church with us Easter Sunday? Okay. Now they know what I believe about this. So we sit there, and the pastor starts preaching, probably the first half of his message was why we know that Easter isn't really what we think it is. And he mentioned the Good Friday and how Lent has to do with weeping for Tammuz, and it has nothing to do with it. And all of the things that I've been saying, he said for the first half of his message, and then the inevitable but came, and then the excuse for why they do it anyway. And I just turned to my mother, I'm like, did you just hear what he just said? The first half of his sermon was validating everything I've been saying all along. But, so I have to believe that was a God, as my uncle would say, that's a God wink right there. Because what they couldn't receive from me, here they heard from him, and all he did was confirm everything that I had said anyway. Now they got something to think about. So sometimes, I guess, you have to pray about it and, see what the Lord leads you to do, to be a light in those situations, because if you're still keeping the Sabbath and everything, hey, there's nothing wrong with worshiping on Sunday too, and sometimes you can be a light to your friends and family, but I think it may be a mistake for you to think that you can just go in there and on a crusade. That's like, being a Baptist and trying to convert all the Catholics. I'm going to go convert all the Catholics because I'm a Baptist, or just imagine a Jehovah's Witness coming in to try to convert all the Baptists. We're kind of in the same situation, So,
I have a question I'd like to ask the panel. Is it okay?
Okay.
In Proverbs 26, verses 4 and 5, it says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you also be like him." Number verse 5, it says, "Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes." I'm asking you guys. I want to hear what you guys have to say about
I've done a
this.
daily devotion on this very verse.
Yeah.
And the whole point, I want to read it again. What verse was it again?
26, 4 and 5.
Yes. Okay, you just read it. I need to read it for myself again. "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you will be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes." Bottom line is, stay away from a fool. That's what he's saying. No matter what you do around a fool, you lose. He will always be the wise. He will always be the one who has the right answer. He will make you look like the fool, when in reality, he's the fool himself. So being around him, you will do no good. You avoid the fool.
That's great advice. Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts on it?
That sounds good to me.
Hey guys,
that's actually better than what I was going to say. I was going to say it takes wisdom to know whether you should answer him or not, but I really like what you said, so I'm changing my answer.
I'm working on your other theology too.
You guys, we got a question from the
Stay
chat.
away from all together.
We got a question from the chat in Virtual House Church chat here online. So everybody's saying hi, by the way.
Hi,
if you
by the
guys
way.
want to say hi back, they want to see you guys. So the question is, and this is a couple questions that have come up from two different people. A similar question. John Padilla is one of the listeners. He listens to you guys all the time. Some of you guys know who he is. This question is important, and he's got a kind of a two-part to it. I'm going to ask both parts. It says, is the deity of Yeshua a core essential? And then the other question, which is pretty similar, and he said, I don't mean to get too deep, but I am studying atonement and salvation. Regarding Yeshua's crucifixion, what is the difference between a substitution penal sacrifice atonement or a ransom payment sacrifice, and which is the correct biblical model for our atonement?
That's not deep at all. Steve said he wants to go with the second.
I'll gladly cover the second one.
What was the first verse? I forgot what it was.
So it is the deity of Yeshua a mandate for salvation? Can I say something on that too? Here's my concern. Here's my concern. Whenever what camera? I'm talking to this guy. Are we live on this one? I got two red lights. Double vision here. The whole point is, Well, I have heard the debate of Trinity and oneness since I was 4 years old. Okay, I can say this because when my family, we were United Pentecostal. When I was 4 years old, we switched over to the Assembly of God Church. Okay, now the United Pentecostal believes all strict oneness, one God. Okay, obviously Assembly of God, Trinity. Okay, now when my mom and dad, when they switched to the Assembly of God, they didn't switch their theology. They were still over here in the oneness camp. But at the same time, they let us children be raised in the Trinity camp. Okay, and since I was 4 years old, I have heard my dad debate every single minister, every single Sunday school teacher you can imagine. So I've heard this. And the funny thing is that it's caught my attention in these last years. If it was such an important issue, at least in my dad's eyes, he would have never, ever, ever let us go to an Assembly of God church being taught this, okay? But yet at the same time, he was very firm, very emphatic on what he believed, okay? All I can tell you is I feel we are debating this dead horse, okay? There's one thing I can tell you the scripture emphatically says. You have to believe Yeshua is the Son of God. The scriptures are clear. If you do not believe he's the Son of God, then now we've got problems. Now, if you want to debate the deity of him, okay, I can tell you right now, there is a unity between Yahweh and him that cannot be understood. Whether you want to believe Trinity or you want to believe oneness, there is a unity there that cannot be humanly understood. And in my opinion, if the Father wanted it to be, if it's going to be truly a salvational issue, it would be far more clearer in the scriptures. Okay, I have been on both sides. As a matter of fact, you pick a debate. Of what side do you want to be on this debate? I'll take the other side, and I'll gladly. I'll stand with you toe to toe. And then we go to another room, and somebody else wants to take the other side. Then I'll take the other side. I'll stand with you toe to toe. I've heard all the debates. Both sides have got verses that you just go, wow. But yet we want to say, no, you're wrong. Like we have all this understanding from Yahweh flooded into our brain, and we're His equal. We can share it with others. You know, the bottom line is we don't have that. And in my opinion, I believe we are fighting over this for nothing. If you believe He is part of a three thing, good for you. Is He the Son of God? Okay, is He Son of Yahweh? If you believe He's all in one, good for you. Do you believe He's the Son of God? Okay, that's the core. Now, maybe I am not being strict enough on this. I don't know. And I'm not offended if you disagree with me on this. I'm really not. But my concern is I see this as a divisional point that does not need to be dividing us. And you guys can please add in more.
I don't know where he was going with the whole atonement thing. I just did a video on my site, or it's on the YouTube channel, on atonement. And because there's a lot of teachings right now who are out there pulling people away out of the Hebrews, Torah, Messianic congregations and trying to make you believe that human atonement, human sacrifice is not found in your Torah. Well, I show you numerous instances where it is. So go watch that video. I mean, it'd take forever to get into that. And, you know, I don't know how much time we have left here and probably want to get to other questions. But there are many instances in Torah. Oh, do we? Oh, well, let's. But no, there are many instances in Torah where you can find human atonement, human sacrifice. You know, where you give up. Where something says what sacrifice is, you give up something for something else. It's in there. And so these people who are pulling people out and saying, you know, this whole Yeshua thing, it's human sacrifice, human atonement, that is totally not Torah. It is Torah. It is Torah.
You know, I think one of the things that has been on my mind a lot lately, and I might be getting a little off subject with this, but I'm addressing this because it does deal with the question of the Trinity and the question of the deity of Yeshua. One thing that's been on my mind a lot lately is how much are we seeking knowledge and understanding, and you know, it's just this desire for information, this desire for knowledge, and how much are we seeking to just know Him? The Bible doesn't tell us that we have to understand Him. It says that we need to know him. We need to follow him. We need to listen to him. We need to believe him, trust him. It doesn't say we have to comprehend him. It doesn't say we have to have a theology degree to figure this out. It says we have to have faith of a child. Does the child comprehend the nature of God? The nature of the deity of Messiah? No. A child can trust, and a child can love, and a child can build a relationship with the God of the universe. And that is so much more important. And so I want to challenge all of us that in our pursuit of truth, that we don't lose sight of pursuing him.
Amen.
Okay?
And I would just say regarding the deity of Christ issue, Hebrews says that he was the expressed image of the Father. He said to Philip, if you've seen me, you've seen my Father. He said, I and my Father are one. John 1 starts off, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's good enough for me. I'm like, okay, that's what it says. I mean, why do we have to fight about it? That's what it says. It is written, right? And in terms of salvation, I just distill it down to the conversation on the cross. What did the thief get right? Did he have to understand the Trinity? Did he have to understand the Holy Spirit? Is the Holy Spirit a spirit? Is it a person? Is it a third person in the Trinity? Did he have to have all this long list of requirements that theologians put on people today? No, he said, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. He acknowledged who Yeshua was. He acknowledged that he was a sinner. Hey, we're here because we did what we did. He's innocent. It just distills down to the simplicity of the conversation on the cross. If it worked for the thief, then it's going to work for you too.
Amen. Regarding the sacrifice issue that he was asking, I just did a teaching a couple weeks ago titled His Sacrifice of All Things. And I bring out in the teaching that Yeshua's sacrifice, okay, listen to what I'm about to say. So if you have questions, I want to answer them. But Yeshua's sacrifice was not a sin sacrifice as prescribed in the law. Okay, please understand that. People say, well, he was a sin sacrifice. No, he was not a sin sacrifice. Okay, because Paul even says here, I got it here in Galatians 2:21, I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. If he was a sacrifice that was already in the law, why did he die? Just go do that sacrifice. Okay, the whole point was they were divorced. Okay, and then I'm going to be making a longer teaching on this. The whole point is his sacrifice was a replacement sacrifice. He was the Passover lamb. When he takes your place, he takes your sin in all of you and washes it away. So it's a replacement. It's not a sin sacrifice by how the law is described. Okay, and there's lots of sacrifices all throughout the law. And there is one specifically, and I forgot, forgive me for right now, but it says you can bring a lamb or a goat as a sin sacrifice. Well, there it is. If people keep pointing to it. No, because the northern kingdom was divorced. They could not come back in. There was no sacrifice in the law that would allow them to come back into covenant with Yahweh. They were gone. So there's no way to come back in unless he died in their place, and then thus the whole element of baptism. We are dead with him, and we are what? Raised to new life in him. So we can come back into covenant. So hopefully that helps the question that came out. The whole point is the sacrifice of Yeshua was not a sacrifice that is found in the law. It's a sacrifice that's found in the Moed, that being Passover, is a replacement sacrifice.
I think Paul talks about it in Romans 7 really well too. Yeah. So he talks about how, he compares our relationship with marriage, right? And so he makes this connection. He says, I'm talking to those who understand the law, because this is important. According to the law, if you become divorced and your wife goes away and marries another, you can never bring her back, right? Deuteronomy 24, right? And so according to the Torah, Israel, whom God divorced, went off and played the harlot with other gods and made herself unworthy, unable to ever return to her former husband. So what did he do? The only way to end that marriage covenant was for one of them to die. And so what did he do? He sacrificed himself so that he could bring her back. Right? It's like this ultimate love story that, yeah, I love her so much, I'm willing to die for her. And then what happened? He resurrected as a new man so that he can come into a new covenant and bring back his beloved.
Yeah. He died for her and died as her. You know, when I saw Jim Staley's Identity Crisis, how many of you guys have seen that before? It blew my mind. And then I followed that up with Steve's teachings with Lost Sheep and Nailed to the Cross. Man, if you haven't seen those, that's a powerful 3-pack right there. Watch those 3. Because that is just so huge. I mean, that's the reconciliation. When you realize that this whole salvation thing is all about restoring the divorced northern kingdom. I mean, he says it point blank. We didn't understand this when we were in what I now call pagan Christianity, dispensational pagan Christianity. And when I did away with that and started seeing, wait a minute, he's sitting there talking to the Jew in Judea and said, hey, I've only come from the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Like that just like right over my head before. 40 years right over my head. And then when I finally understood that, well, I mean, this understanding of salvation has taken on a whole new and evolving meaning for me. I'm still learning things about it. In fact, I heard somebody, I think it was Sandy Bruce, you guys know who he is? He spoke at a Sukkot a couple of years back, and he said, you know, you're not really saved. You're redeemed in the process of being saved. And like I'm like, what? You can talk a little slower, you know. And I still don't fully grasp what he was saying, although I get the general gist of it. But I'm leaning towards that myself. It's like, okay, he paid the price. I mean, he was purchased for the price of a woman. There's your first thought. The 30 pieces of silver. And then when he says, let this cup pass from me, and again, you got to watch Steve's teaching on that because, I mean, I told you I did passion plays. Well, you know, I've done the scene in the garden, let this cup pass from me and all that, and I've done the crucifixion scene. I understood the crucifixion side of it very well. I spent a lot of time studying it. But the part in the garden, let this cup pass from me, I always just thought it was just sort of, you know, this metaphor for, you know, this cup of suffering. Well, yes, it is a cup of suffering, but it's an actual... There's a biblical Torah principle that is being spoken of there, of a literal cup that was for the bride that was suspected of adultery. And right. And he's like, no, you're going to have to drink it. And I always wonder, okay, if you had to die, I mean, why couldn't they just, okay, I get it, your bones can't be broken or whatever. Why can't you just strangle them? Or, you know, why couldn't, there's a lot of ways to be killed. Why did it have to be crucifixion? Why did it have to last 6 hours? Why? All of the questions I had all of a sudden were answered by really that teaching nailed to the cross, because it's really the only form of execution that fulfills a multitude of the book of Leviticus, really. But right down to the point where his thighs literally rotted and his belly swelled, exactly as what the prescribed judgment is for the adulterous woman. Wow. And so he paid that price. And now, you know, through everything that has been said there, we have salvation. We have been redeemed. We are the redeemed bride. But he's coming back for a bride that's what? Without, right? So we've got to clean ourselves up. We're in a process. We got to, quote unquote, work out our salvation in fear and trembling. So I'm beginning to understand, though I can't articulate it as well as Sandy Bruce did, this idea is that, yes, you've been redeemed, but you're in the process of being saved. You guys have any thoughts on that? Okay. All right. Yeah.
Since we're in this Torah portion, the story of Phineas, you kind of touched on a minute ago, but I believe it's 25 12 in the word shalom or peace in the original text, the letter vav is broken. What do you think the Father is telling us through that, and what the significance is of that? That's the only place in Scripture where the letter vav is broken. No, it's in Numbers 25:12. Surely there's some significance and meaning in what the Father's telling us there. I've heard different things about the broken covenant through that. I just didn't know if y'all had learned on that and had any input.
Numbers 26.
25:12.
Hello. Okay. Therefore say, behold, I give to him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and to his descendants after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his God and made an atonement for the children of Israel. Is that the one you're talking about? Okay. And so in the first where it says, therefore, behold, I say, I give to him my covenant. That word covenant is the one that has the broken vav in it?
The word peace. The actual
the word peace.
shalom in the original text, the vav and shalom is a broken vav.
Okay, and the word peace. Gotcha. Interesting.
Let me just quickly say this was one of the places where atonement was made for the children of Israel. How? He killed 2 people. 2 people died, the unrighteous for the righteous. People out there telling you that there's no human atonement or sacrifice in your Torah. There's just one. There's more. There's more.
I actually have an annotation in my Bible, but I didn't have an elaboration on it. So I put an exclamation point like, wow, because I saw that at some study I did, but for some reason I didn't write down any explanation for it. Do you have something?
I don't have an answer, if that's what you're asking, but I have an interesting thought. Oh, go ahead.
Regarding the where Phineas drove his sword through the bride and the groom, I believe, was from the tribe of Simeon. Is that right?
I don't know if they were bride and groom. It was
Well, the man and the woman.
Right.
So, and I find it interesting. I was just as more of a thought than a statement that I was studying the scripture that we know that 24,000 had died. The plague had taken 24,000 lives, and it just so happens that Simeonites, after the second consensus, had lost the most amount of people. So I found it interesting that maybe because of his sin, he had lost the most amount of people, possibly. Of course, it's conjecture that from their tribe, and so because of that, he needed to save the people, and that was how he did it.
I have a question. So in our Torah, the creation account is so important to do apologetics for, because if you can dismantle the creation account and the story of Genesis, then you can dismantle the rest of Scripture. So one of the biggest things that I have a question about in the creation account is the ability for Adam and Eve to repopulate the earth, because in the Torah, the incest is a sin. It's defined as a sin. So how, I want to hear your different theories, of course. I want to hear your different, thoughts on this. But, the biggest thing with Torah that the Christian church said is that it evolves. And my problem with the evolving, incest thing is, how did they reproduce? I understand the genetics. They had great genetics. They had the perfect genetics because they were created right there in the garden. But how do they get around the fact that Torah is forever, it's everlasting, and how could they repopulate?
My opinion is Torah does not evolve. Okay, it's set. So there's rules in life. There's rules that are going to bring blessing and curses. Okay, you follow the rules, you get blessings. You don't, you get curses. Now my 10-year-old, he's not driving yet, but he's 10. I'm not going to give him the rules for driving now. But at some point down the road, as he grows, new rules will apply. Right. And those rules will come to pass. Right. Okay. Just because he may, in fact, let's say he gets behind the car. Let's just say tomorrow he gets behind the car and he drives the car down the road. Have I ever told him he can't drive the car? It doesn't apply yet. So what if he gets up behind the wheel and drive? There's lots of 10-year-olds where I live who drive cars and tractors every day down the road. Because there's only one sheriff in this county, and so they don't have to worry about it. But have I ever told my 10-year-old he doesn't have to drive the car? No, he's never gotten that rule yet. But hopefully he's not listening. But I believe that as we change, as we grow, as his people mature and they continue to populate and obey and disobey, there are rules that come into play where he gives that bring blessing and curses. So at that point, it didn't apply yet. Yeah, the genetics were perfect. But you know what? By the time Moses comes around, you have Abraham marrying his half-sister, and you have some other instances scattered throughout the Bible that that people speculate happened. At this point, no, it's done. You don't do this anymore. And so there it goes out, and now it's a blessing or a curse, whether or not you follow it.
And piggybacking off that, it's not evolving, it's revealing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it is. He reveals it when it's time. Example, we know wearing tzitzits are in Torah. So did Adam and Eve wear tzitzits? They didn't have clothes. Okay, so the whole point. Right. So the whole point, my whole point is, it's Yahweh has given us each thing as needed. That's why I believe nothing was written down until it was all revealed. It was all passed down via word of mouth. Okay, and then when everything has been revealed, when it's all said and done, okay, this is it. Nothing's changing. This is everything right here. Now, that being said, we know the Torah, like he just mentioned, that the Torah is forever, and it is. But go to Revelation, what do we find? Okay, there's no sun. There's no sun in eternity. Guess what that means? There's no calendar. Well, the calendar, whoa, that's a debate for everybody, okay? Because that's Torah, okay? But the point is, there's no sun. That means there's no feast days. Well, why? There's no feast days. We're living the feast then, okay? But does that do away with Torah? No, it's just not going to apply because now we're living in the reality of it all. It's still established as forever, but it's not going to apply at that moment from there on out. Just as if at the beginning, things didn't apply, then at the end, things will not apply, but it will still be written down. For example, if I have a road that I drive on, well, if there's a flood comes and knocks that road out, well, can I drive on it? No. Okay, but I can promise you there's a law that says I can only drive 55 miles per hour on that road. But there's no road, so I can't drive on it. The law is still there, but it doesn't apply until the road is fixed. The point being is, in eternity, it will never be fixed because we're living into perfection at that time. I hope and pray that makes sense.
I agree with what both of them said, by the way. I don't know about the way they phrase something, though, when they say it doesn't apply. I'm not sure if I agree with the phrasing of that, but I understand the concept of what you guys are saying. I would say more along the lines of Adam and Eve were given a certain amount of information. They weren't given all the information. And what they were given was God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Their instructions were to be fruitful and multiply. And so that was what they were given. They weren't given everything. And so they took what they were given and they did with it what they could. And then later on, more instructions were given to us. It wasn't that the law changed or evolved or was added to later. It was just that the instructions were not revealed to us yet. Exactly. Yeah. And so as the revelation of the instructions came to us, then we start walking in those. It's the same thing in the book of Acts. Acts 15, Jerusalem Council. What did they say? They said, as these new Gentiles are coming to faith in God, don't burden them with all of the Torah. Start with just a few things. Tell them to stop, worshiping idols, stop their fornications, stop eating strangled things and drinking blood. These things are the most important things. They need to immediately stop. The rest of it, they're going to get as they start walking down this journey, as they are attending synagogue on the Sabbath, as they are studying the scriptures. They're going to start to pick up this other stuff. Don't burden them with the full weight of everything right now. They're going to get it eventually. And I think that's the same kind of progressive revelation that we see in the scriptures. He didn't burden Adam and Eve with the full weight of everything right there at the beginning. It was a progressive revelation of God's instructions for his people. And so that's the way I would explain it. Not that it didn't apply, it just wasn't revealed to them yet. So does that make sense?
We have a question over here.
No.
Actually, it's about the broken vav. The Monty Judah has an answer for that, if I can. It's the spear. When he shish kebabbed him, you could see the spear on one side and the spear on the other, but not in the middle, because that's where their bodies was. So the broken vav represents the spear that pierced him.
That connects with Isaiah 53, right? That he was wounded for our transgressions, pierced for our iniquities, and by his stripes we are healed. That peace that he's talking about, right there in Numbers that you brought up, connects to how he was pierced. And then he is the chastisement of our peace, right? That's good. Awesome.
It's interesting because that letter, the letter Vav, I've got one of those Hebrew alphabets that gives you the numerical value and the meanings of the letters. The meaning for the Vav is to join, to nail, to establish, or secure. That's what the letter actually means.
Just to quickly follow up what you guys were talking about with Jake's question about the law not changing. What about when Yeshua said, the Pharisees came and they said, Moses gave us the right of the instructions about divorce, and he says in the beginning it was not so, because of the hardness of our hearts, it was added later. How does that? Is that related to the similar concept, I guess, is what I just wanted to add that into that. Close it out.
Okay, we got two more questions, one right here, then one over there.
This question is a little bit related to apologetics, and I've kind of struggled with it. Me and my wife have a short answer. We can come up with a long, drawn-out answer, but a short answer to when it's said to you, Jesus is my Sabbath rest. I mean, we get it a lot, and I can go to my Bible and draw it out.
Can you quote me that verse?
Yeah.
What verse is that in, please?
Hebrews 4. Hebrews 4.
That's not what it says, though, right?
Right. And I understand that. We understand that. And we can show 100 verses, and it kind of leads into the explanation to answer the question. But just a short response is what we've been struggling to come up with for that.
Hebrews.
We get it so often.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
What's the question?
The question is what would be your response to if somebody was to tell you, well, Jesus is my Sabbath rest, without leading them down the whole story of, well, we need to keep all Torah and, starting from the beginning.
I'm going to give you a chance to answer, but I want to go first. Can I? Okay. I've got the microphone. I know you really want to talk. I actually really like that question whenever people bring it up, because I know whenever I said, show me the verse, I knew you were talking about Hebrews 4, because what it says is there remains a Sabbath keeping for those who are Messiah, right? What's interesting about this is the way I understand it. I may be totally off, but here's the way I understand it, and this is how it makes sense to me. We have a Sabbath of weeks, a Sabbath of days, right? So every 7 days we have a Sabbath. We have a Sabbath of years. Well, we have a Sabbath of weeks, the Feast of Weeks. We have a Sabbath of years. Every 7 years you have a sabbatical year. Then you have every 49 years you have a sabbatical year. You have Jubilee, right? What's interesting is there's a Sabbath that has not yet happened. It's the millennial Sabbath. And so we have 6,000 years of sin and suffering, of labor and work. And then when Messiah returns, He will reign on earth for 1,000 years. That is the Sabbath that yet remains, that has not happened yet, is the Sabbath millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Messiah, the seventh day. If a day to the Lord is as 1,000 years, 6 days we will labor, and on the seventh day we will rest. Okay, I guess I'll pass the mic now. Does that make sense? And so when Messiah returns, he initiates that Sabbath rest. So that's why there is a Sabbath that remains for those who are in Messiah. That's your turn.
First off, he kept the Shabbat. He kept the Sabbath. We see that. So when someone comes to me and says, well, Jesus is my Sabbath rest, I'm like, well, he kept the Sabbath. And 1 John 2:6 says, we are to walk as he walked. Well, how did he walk? He kept the Sabbath. And then in verse 11 of that verse that they're quoting incorrectly, by the way, it says that let us labor, therefore, to enter into that rest. What rest? It's the verse before it, verse 10, where it says, there remains therefore a rest to the people of God. Well, I'm sorry. For he that is entered into his rest, he also ceased from his own works as God did from his. God ceased from his works on the seventh day. And then the next verse, let us labor therefore to enter into that rest. So what argument do you have for not keeping Shabbat? Yeshua did it. It says to walk after he walked, follow his example. And then this verse, if they kept reading, says to enter into that rest, the very rest that the Father ceased to from his works. I mean, if you can't see that, you don't want to see it.
We have one more question.
Yeah, I just want to say something real quick. I wrote a blog on this a while back. If you actually look that up, Hebrews 4:9, for there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. The word there in Greek is sabbatismos, if I'm saying that right, which means a keeping of the Sabbath. So there remains a keeping of the Sabbath for the people of God. That would be my short answer.
If I can add to that, right in those same verses here, I'm going to read for you verses 4, chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. Because if they ask you that question, this is what you can ask them. So let's look at that verse. It says, therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. Verse 2, it says, for we also have had the gospel preached to us, just as they did. But the message they heard was of no value to them, because they who heard did not combine it with faith. So ask them, what gospel did they hear? It was the Torah. And if they're going to keep that verse, they have to acknowledge that the gospel was Torah. And then you can also quote, there's a verse that we see Yeshua going forth preaching the gospel. He didn't have the cross yet. So what's the gospel? The Torah.
And that passage is also a bit confusing for King James only types, because verse 8 says, for if Jesus had given them rest, then would he not afterward have spoken of another day? It's actually Jesus there. That's Joshua. But if you're a King James only, and that's the end all be all for all time, you're really kind of jacked up on this one. Right. Bingo. Exactly right. Yep.
Okay, next question.
Okay, about 5 minutes, okay, 6 minutes, get them out of Baptist theology, the other doctor, I'm probably gonna get stoned walking out this room when I leave. But when Genesis, and you guys gonna get mad at me, but I'm on this thing called the Torah. The God say and try to do it PG. God says, be fruitful and multiply. Well, in the Torah, did it say go and get married, then have babies? Well, did it do that in Torah? We always want to talk from 20 years. You got to get married, then have babies. The Bible says don't add or take away. But if we look at it and take it literally, the Bible says be fruitful and multiply. That a commandment. But where was the commandment of getting married? I mean, those are the doctrine and get back. I'm sorry.
All right. So
Don't
the question
tell
is,
me.
where is it in Torah to get married? And this is actually in this Torah portion. If you believe it or not, it is actually in the first part of the Torah portion, because when a woman is born, she's placed under the father's covering. Okay, she's under that covering until such a time when a vow is made or asked to be made by the father to grant that covering to go to another male. Now, at that point, let me quote Fiddler on the Roof twice in one night.
Wow.
It is a good movie, right? Come on, right? So, but you know, the girl, Seidel, she's very, nervous about her. What's the boy's name? Seidel, and what's? Yeah, but it's like if we ask him now and he says no, that's it. She's worried because they don't want to go to her father and ask him, because once he makes that proclamation, yes or no, that's it. Because right here, you have a vow. If a man makes a vow, a woman makes a vow, and it talks about the father. If he says that's it. You hold your peace. You're done. And so they didn't want to ask for that marriage, because for that woman to go below the other man's covering, the father has to let go of his covering for that woman to go. And so that's where the marriage comes in. There is a marriage because every woman is placed under the covering of her father first and then her husband second. There should be really, technically, even when a husband dies, there should be no woman without a covering. It should go back to her brother or an uncle or somebody that takes hold of that woman, and if not marrying her, but takes hold of that woman to protect her and give her sustenance and a housing and clothing, and just provide for her until maybe such a time she can marry again or whatever. But every woman should have a covering. That's how it was supposed to work.
But supposed to what do we go look for? Do we go look for the father other than the woman? Because you can all sit uphill, and I like you, Lex. Don't think that I don't, but even in the Bible, in Matthew, it says, whoever look upon a wife or a woman committed adultery. Well, have you ever, don't answer, but have you ever seen your wife naked? And have you lusted after your wife? And are you in sin?
Okay, we've all broken the commandments in spirit, if not in deed. But my point is that what? I don't understand what you're saying. Listen. It's okay. It's okay. But we've all broken the commandments in spirit, if not in deed. Okay. So, but the way the Torah says, that woman's still going to have a covering over her. Okay. Whether it's a young girl or a married woman. When you look upon a married woman, that's adultery if it's not your wife.
Well, it is your wife. It's your wife. Naked, that's still a woman. You still admit
Well, hang on a second. We probably need to define some terms. First, I want to answer your question you asked earlier: is where in the Torah does it say that you're to have a wife? It comes from Genesis chapter 2. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And so right there at the very beginning with Adam and Eve is the commandment to have a husband and a wife. Now, as far as lust, to define what lust is not, if I look at my wife naked, I would not call that lust, because I would call it appreciating the beauty that God has given to me. She is my wife. She belongs to me. Lust is to desire something that is not my own. Lust is connected to covetousness. And so if I am coveting my neighbor's wife, then I am desiring something that is not mine. If I am desiring my own wife, that is not lust. It's not coveting. It is mine. She is mine. She is me. We just said the two shall become one flesh. I am looking upon my own wife. We are one flesh. This is not lust. It's not covetousness. It's pure. It's love. It's holy. It is what God has created it to be. Now, if I look at someone else's wife in the same way as I look at my own, that is lust. And so there is a difference, and we have to be clear on how we define those things.
It takes a woman in King James. It does say woman in King James. And it does. You have
But can you have adultery?
a woman.
Can you have adultery with your own wife?
Yes, of course.
No. She's your wife. You are married to her.
Yeah, let's talk about this later. We can belabor this for a long time. Go ahead.
This is from Psalms 5:18 and 19. I'm already know. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of your youth, a loving deer and a pleasant doe. Let her nipples satisfy you at all times, and be captivated by her love always. When your wife is given to you, do you not know that Jehovah knew what she would do to you? and she is for your enjoyment, and you're for hers. There's no sin in that. So when he says, don't look at a woman, he's talking about another woman, not yours. Right. Because yours is you. You're one. So you can't look at another woman and it be your wife. She is you. And she is there and you are there for her blessing. I mean, it's just to enjoy that sanctity within your own private time together. And I think that is a correlation to our relationship with the Father.
Something I want to add to this too. I've worked with youth for a long time, and one of the situations I'll always have youth come up to me and say, what's God's will for my life, type of thing. And the whole element is, especially when you're young, you always imagine being married. You always imagine finding that right one, what have you. And my concern is there is a pressure on young adults, teens. I have to get married. Okay. When we look at the command, be fruitful and multiply, who was the command going to? That command went twice. It went to Adam and Eve, and it went to who else? Noah and his wife, both married. The commandment, in my opinion, of being fruitful and multiply goes to those who are married. Okay, let me read for you a scripture in Matthew. And remember, if you're not married, there's no commandment to be married. And in fact, I would say just the opposite almost. It is Matthew 19:10. The disciples said to him, if this is the situation between a husband and a wife, it is better not to marry. Yeshua replied, not everyone can accept this word, but only those whom it has been given. So only to those to whom it has been given. So it's not for everyone. And then he says, for some are eunuchs because they are born that way. Others were made that way by men, and others have renounced marriage because of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept this. Meaning what? There will be some who will not be married because it's what the Father has placed on their heart. They should not be looked down upon because they are not married. They should not be having a command saying, be fruitful and multiply. Therefore, you're sinning because you're not married. You can't be fruitful. No, it's not for everyone. Okay, so be mindful of how we use that terminology. Be fruitful, multiply. Because some people who are celibate, and I have friends who are celibate. Okay, and that can be taken as an offense. I mean, as a hurt. Well, you think I'm in sin because I'm dedicating my life to the Father in this way? But yet, if you say that's a commandment to all, you're really you're belittling someone who is just, you're adding to Scripture. Yes. If you're defining marriage as standing in front of somebody and signing a piece of paper, then correct. If you define marriage as two becoming one, then yes, they were. And that's the principle that I see in Scripture, is that when a man and a woman come together in one, in the original image that God created them to be, in his likeness, that is marriage. Because it's the only way you become one. So we got about 10 minutes left. Do we have any more?
I got one more question back here.
I'd like to get your opinion, the panel's opinion on, you were talking about Phinehas there in Numbers 25, and it kind of reminded me of Jason Maccabee's standing up for God. And I think it probably relates to this conference that we're having, proclaiming the end from the beginning from the end. How do you feel about really, I think it's kind of a deception out there in Christianity today to worship. All you have to do is believe in Jesus, and they forget about our Creator. And they've went away from the Torah because they believe in the dispensationalism lie that's out there that God has done away with all that. Is that, I don't believe it's going to get less severe. I think it's going to get more severe. And shouldn't we be warriors to stand up more so to proclaim like Phinehas did or Jason Maccabees did?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm trying to think back now because I've been walking in this walk for a little over 7 years now. So it's hard for me to kind of, it's almost like another lifetime ago. What was I thinking back then about a lot of things, but like it seemed in that mindset that the end all be all was Jesus. But yet he says, look, I'm the way to the Father. No one comes unto him except through me. So yeah, he's the door. You got to go through him to get to the Father, but he's not the end goal. The end goal is the Father. And somehow, at least in my vague recollection of that paradigm, that was lost. Like, yeah, we knew the Father was out there. There was, something about the Father, but, now I understand it's all about the Father. And now that's why I am zealous for this stuff and trying to get people to understand. It's like, look, yes, Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the way, but he's the way to the Father. And oh, by the way, the Father has rules. And when you look at my go-to place for almost any question to do with the law is 1 John 2-5. I'm like, look, just read 1 John 2-5. I believe nothing more and nothing less. For me, 1 John 2-5 is the cliff note bullet point of the whole thing. And basically it all comes down to this. Okay, you love God, great. The way you have a relationship is through Yeshua to get to him. But if you say you love God but you don't obey him, then you're a liar and the truth's not in you. So, the end goal is the Father. Correct. Yep.
I think we also need to define what is worship. I think so many times we think that worship is, oh, we're going to sing this song about God and we worshiped him today. Where is that described in the Bible? Okay, everybody gather together and let's sing a song to worship him. This is how we're going to worship him, right? When you look in the scriptures, what do we find is it says that, like, for example, Deuteronomy 12, it says that you shall, let's see, You shall not at all do as we are doing here today, every man doing what is right in his own eyes. And then we go on a little bit later. It says, when you enter the land, don't follow after the way of the pagans and do what they do. And it ends and it says, whatever I command you, be careful to observe it, that you shall not add to it nor take away from it. And then we get into the New Testament, and Yeshua says, the Father is seeking true worshipers who will worship him in spirit and in truth. And so it's, the idea of worship in the scriptures is to serve, to obey, to follow his instructions. And so he has given us these instructions. And when we stray from those instructions, like, you read it, Deuteronomy 13, what does it say? It says that if there's a prophet or a dreamer of dreams that comes along and he does some miracle, and then he teaches you to follow some other god and turn away from the commandments that the Lord your God has given you, he's a false prophet and he's leading you astray, right? You look at the 10 Commandments and it says, you shall have no other gods before me, right? You shall worship the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, with all your strength. Every part of your being is to be devoted wholly to him. We see in the New Testament where was it James, I think? He talks about how we're not to be double-minded, tossed to and fro. How are we double-minded? Because we're partly devoted to God and we're partly not devoted to him. So we get tossed back and forth, to and fro, because we're not 100% devoted to him, right? So worship is not the songs you sing. Worship is the life you live. Who are you serving? Who are you obeying? Steve?
Regarding your point on, just faith. We've all heard it. We've said it at times. But, when we look at, growing up, in the church, I remember hearing all the songs about, the father of the faith, Father Abraham and many sons. We've all sing it, you know what I'm saying? And he's the father of the faith, right? Well, let's look at what James says about the father of the faith. If you look at James chapter 2, verses, latter teens all the way through the 20s, the whole topic is about Abraham and faith. Okay, after he discusses Abraham, the father of the faith, what's he say? He says, you see that you see that a person is justified by what he does and not by faith alone. Because Father Abraham showed actions along with his faith. His actions proved his faith. So therefore, and that's what the whole point is. So when someone wants to come and say it's faith only, I show that verse to them and they just kind of like, because it's right there in his New Testament, not even Torah. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's their book. You know what I'm saying? And so the whole point is when someone talks about faith only, I go right to James chapter 2.
Let me just real quickly add, in fact, I've done videos along that line where it's like, where it talks about John 3:16, believing. There's deeds that are talked about in the verses immediately following. It's action that's always followed, by true faith and belief. Your actions will show your true faith and belief. However, when people bring up, in this movement, bring up Phinehas and some other people who have done some amazing things to show their faith, I say, whoa, calm down. Don't grab the pitchforks and torches quite yet. There is going to come a time, because and there's people who tell, well, we have all these idols around here. We need to smash them down. We need to do all these things. I'm like, calm down. You do that now, you're going to go to jail. There will be a time when that will take place. It's not yet. So I just want to make sure you're okay. No pitchforks and torches.
That's awesome. That's a great point, because when we were going through this, I think it was maybe the second or third cycle that our group was going through it. I had just come back from Washington, D.C., and after all of my Babylon Rising research, taking the red pill, I went to D.C., and I'd been there many times in my life before that when I was sucking on the blue pill and had no clue what I was looking at. But when I went there, having taken the red pill, so to speak, I was seeing just how much is in our nation's capital, especially. I was like, we need to take a bulldozer to Washington, D.C. We're in this Torah portion.
He
I'm
kicked
like,
the obelisk really hard,
Well,
but it didn't do anything.
Well, what happened? Yeah. Well, actually, what happened was because I was like, "Rah!" And this, "Rah!" Just like that, right? Sparta. So I was like, we needed to take a bulldozer to that place, And this older woman was sitting next to me. She goes, "No, we need to pray." And yeah. She goes, "No, I'm serious. We need to pray. If you really believe that this nation has all these idols and all this stuff, then we need to pray against the false gods of our nation and whatnot." I'm like, okay. So our whole group got together with intent and prayed against all of that. And I kid you not, it was either that day or the next day that they had the earthquake in Washington, D.C. And the Washington Monument went,
What are you doing here? Go back and pray.
Yeah, I know. We should have finished up. We should have finished up. But I got to tell you, like, everybody that was at that meeting was on Facebook. Rob, everybody was like freaking out, because God did that. And NSA, CIA, whoever you are, we didn't do that. God did that. We just prayed.
Down the road from us, there is a Buddhist temple. I mean, in the middle of where I live in the sticks. No, nothing is out there. But believe it or not, in the middle of the woods, there's a little compound, tiny little compound with a Buddhist temple and a Buddhist idol out there. And I always tell people, when the Greater Exodus starts, we're heading that way on our way out.
I believe in the meantime we can pray about those things. And in fact, Zach, would you like to pray us out? We'll finish up our.
Before we end it, I would like for you guys to each kind of, for the people who are watching and for the people here, just kind of give a synopsis or just a little excerpt of what you're going to be discussing this weekend. And, whatever you want to say and whatever you want to talk about, feel free to do. And just each one of you, take your time.
Yeah, real quick. It's going to be apologetics. We're going to talk about what is sin, just some of the very basics, what I think that a new believer coming into Torah needs to understand because they don't teach it in the church. And then that's going to be day one, tomorrow night. And then tomorrow, day after tomorrow, Sunday, we'll be talking about some advanced apologetics, giving a couple of principles, and then also some basically 10 top rebuttals on accusations that Christians give to you for following Torah. So we'll talk about that tomorrow and Sunday.
Tomorrow, I am going to be talking about the gospel and how we as mortals have the hope of immortality. And then Sunday, I'm going to be talking about the strategy of Satan and how we can take that information and use it to our advantage to keep him from getting the best of us.
The theme is declaring the end from the beginning. So that's Isaiah 46:10. And so if we are to believe that we are in the last days, I think many people would say that they do believe that, then we have to go back to the beginning and understand it. And so I'm going to really focus on Genesis, and I'm going to deal with a lot of things in Genesis and go through line by line. And I'm going to ask the question, is Genesis history? Is it literal? Or is it just one big poetry, book? And so we're going to cover that in quite a bit of detail on tomorrow. And then on Sunday, Saturday's going to deal primarily with Genesis, and then Sunday's going to deal with, okay, let's bring it all forward to our day and tie it all together and see what happens.
Tomorrow I will be teaching, and Sunday I'll be preaching. Tomorrow's teaching will really be virtually the same thing, revealing the end from the beginning, but mine's more so from the ancient times, what is still to come, the latter part of the verse, and actually focusing on the first covenant coming out of Egypt with the new covenant coming out of Babylon. Okay, and that'll be discussed tomorrow in detail. That'll be a long one. And then, Sunday night, I will be preaching a message that the Father has placed on my heart that I feel every believer needs to hear. And I'm going to try to make that as short as possible and to enable the latter half of that time opened up for Q&A for what I discussed on Saturday. Because there's always questions with end times. And so I want to make it a point, I have time for that, for those who will have questions on that. So that's my.
All right. And you have anything else, Philip? No? All right. Thank you guys for watching Virtual House Church. Thank you guys for joining us here this evening. Yep. And we'll have Zach close us out in prayer.
Abba, Father, thank you so much for this evening. We thank you for all the safe travel you've granted people for coming here and enjoying this fellowship and this time. We thank you for all the people online. We ask you to bless each and every one of their lives, and just give us a great conference. Give us a wholesomeness. Give us the ability to consume and then take back and put to use what we learn. And Father, let it all be for growing and glorifying your kingdom. We ask us all in the name of Yeshua. Amen.